Hi everyone, my name is Emily and welcome to another Career Talk session by Grad Australia. So I'll be your host for today, and before we start, I'd just like to begin today's session with an acknowledgement of country. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and by doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We acknowledge the elders, past and present, of all the land we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. So I'm joining the call from Brisbane, which is the traditional land of the Turrbal people. So to introduce myself, my name is Emily. I'm one of the webinar hosts at Grad Australia. This is one of our Career Talk sessions. We hold them on a weekly basis around all sorts of topics that help any students or graduates try to make the best of their career. So for those of you who are not familiar with Grad Australia, we are a graduate career site where you can explore and get a backstage pass to see what it's like working with different graduate employers. You can also view a bunch of videos about them, see a bunch of blog posts, just to get a really good idea of what they're like. And when you sign up as well, you also get notified of open applications and opportunities that you can apply to. So today's session is opportunities for engineers in manufacturing, and we are exploring the different career pathways and sharing tips for engineers in the manufacturing sector. And we have a special guest today who is joining us. So we have Neil Royle, who is the engineering and design manager from Visy. And I'd like to just pass it over to Neil to give himself a little bit of an intro. So just share a little bit about yourself, Neil, and how you got to where you are today.
So hi everyone. Thanks for the introduction. So as Emily has said, I'm the engineering and design manager for Visy here in Melbourne. And I think first of all, Visy is a family Australian environment going forward. My role here at Visy is actually really good. It's an exciting role for all our facilities across Australia and New Zealand. And that's, maintaining and operating existing facilities and actually building new facilities as well. Emily, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Neil. So to anyone watching, if you have any questions, just pop them in the comments and we'll get to them. This is absolutely the time to ask any questions that you want. You know, we have Neil here. He's definitely more than qualified to answer any of your questions. So to start off with, we have a bunch of guide questions that we've prepared. So we'll go into those and then we'll bounce back between any of the questions that you guys have. So make sure you pop them in the comments and ask away. So let's start off with some of our questions. Okay, so some of the first questions we have, just to kind of get an overall general overview, is what do manufacturing engineers do?
So Emily, that's a really good question. And I guess it's the number one question why graduates actually study engineering to start with. So I think for me, certainly in my experience, it starts with helping to solve challenges, and some of them might be complex challenges. Some of them may help some of the world's most pressing challenges, for instance, sustainability. But effectively, as an engineer, you'll be thinking out the box, constantly innovating to solve challenges that make an impact to a business. Just to think of some quick examples, you'll be helping to improve the safety and operational effectiveness of process and design and machines and so on. You'll be helping to increase yield rates, to lower costs, to increase profitability. That's why businesses are in business, to make a profit. So it's, whether you're working on an existing facility or indeed maybe working on a new facility, it's all about designing efficient processes that create value for a business's customer, in a nutshell. So I think some of the key things you're going to be doing in your career is, you'll be studying existing processes. You'll be identifying opportunities to improve product design, improving the manufacturing process. And I've said, reducing cost, reducing waste is always going to be key to that. And as I said before, it's not always designing the new. You may need to upgrade or improve an existing facility, and if you're lucky enough, you may even get to work on designing a brand new facility in the future too, which is always really exciting.
Awesome. That was
Back to you,
really
Emily.
interesting. Thanks so much, Neil. Next question we have is just about how to know if manufacturing engineering is right for you. Is there anything that you went through when you were, at the early stages of your career trying to figure that out that the students could benefit from?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about having an inquisitive mind. They always talk about one of the key things that what drives you as an engineer is how things work. And I think even a young age, 10, 11 years old, I started pulling my motorbikes apart, wanted to know how they worked, how to fix them. And so for me, it was just that inquisitive mind on and I guess the passion, not just the inquisitiveness, but the passion and that desire to understand how things work and how to make them better. So I think that's really key. I think what's also key is wanting to make a difference. I think in today's environment, we all talk about sustainability, wanting to make a difference. Well, as an engineer, particularly in the manufacturing sector, you absolutely can. And I think if you have that passion, you have that engineering passion, you have the passion to make a difference, I think that's really key. And I think also, if you're looking for a mundane 9 to 5 job in an office, maybe engineering is not for you. Typically, certainly in my career and what I see here in Visy, our manufacturing engineers are often on the shop floor, looking at how the process is running, engaging with the business that operates it, because often you'll learn the most by talking and engaging with the people who run the plant itself. So it's very much spending time, donning the PPE, getting the high vis on, and actually spending a lot of time on the shop room floor. And I think if that seems appealing, then I think engineering is the job for you, for sure.
Awesome. I'd love to delve a little bit more into one of the things you mentioned about how you can do a lot of change and good things. So is there anything from your career that stands out to you as something that allowed you to really do good in the world, or from another example of another engineer that you know of?
Oh, I'll give you an example in my career many years ago. I'm not going to tell you how many because it'll I'll give you an indication of how old I really am. But, many years ago in South Africa, I was working on a huge stacker and reclaimer plant for effectively, the coal mining industry, so the coal industry. And what the plant did is it blended coals depending on the type of application, albeit a power plant or a steel mill. They all require different grades of coal for those facilities for heat. And part of my thesis during my degree, after being in a graduate engineer role, I developed a wireless communication system for that whole facility to operate on. And just the saving in those days in cabling, time and effort, and so on was pretty significant. I can't remember the figures, but it was all in order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think just the way it operated and the additional safety features that were brought in, that you were able to implement much quicker and faster using a wireless system, I think had huge business benefits. And that's just one small example in my career that I can offer. Certainly, just looking here at Visy, I see the engineers every day working on, how to implement changes to the manufacturing process so that we can use more recycling in our processing. And if we use more recycling, that means less waste going to tip sites, better for the environment, more sustainable, just better for the world. I think those are some really good examples that I see happening today.
That's really cool. I love that example. So just talking a bit about, manufacturing engineering, what kind of companies can manufacturing engineers usually work at?
Um, well, I think here in Australia, it's quite broad actually. So if you just think about Visy, we're in the packaging and recycling business. We're in the glass business. We're in the logistics business. But if you think about, food and beverage, there's chemicals, there's um, um, oil and gas, there's resources. I think just to name a few. I don't think there's any shortage of manufacturing industries here in Australia. I think we're broad and we're deep, and I think it will cater for anyone's needs now and in the future.
Are there any key differences between like the day-to-day tasks of engineering, a manufacturing engineer who's in, for example, like Visy or in oil?
Look, I've worked in the oil and gas sector. I've worked in a couple of sectors. I've worked in the utility sector, so a little bit of energy, oil and gas, water. I think in the main, as a manufacturing engineer or a process engineer, so impacting manufacturing processes, I think there's a common thread, and that common thread is you are looking to make improvements. You're looking to gain efficiencies. You're looking to reduce waste. You're looking to reduce cost, and you're looking to improve safety and profitability. And all of those, all of that requires you to get a really solid understanding of the current process and technologies, looking how you can improve it, and then recommending trialing and trialing technologies and process improvements to achieve your objectives. And I think that's a common thread no matter what industry you work in. And that's what the businesses are going to be looking for in any individual who embarks on their career in manufacturing engineering.
Awesome. And let's talk a little bit about how engineers can get into the industry. Do you have any tips or advice on how they can enter the manufacturing industry?
Yeah, I think it's very much about finding and getting accepted into the right graduate engineering role. And I think it's really key, as a graduate engineer to do your research, maybe even engage, recruitment agencies and so on, but to really go on the hunt for, decide on industries you may be interested in, but then really hunt down those strong graduate programs. And I think, some of the things to consider, I know sometimes opportunities may be thin, but I think there's enough opportunity out there now because of skill shortages. Many companies are now bringing graduate programs back, and certainly in my previous companies, that's certainly been the case. But it's about finding the right industry that you want to work in. It's finding the right company and really putting yourself out there to get hired. And I think that would be my advice is choose the industry you want to work in, and even choose the company you want to work in, and do research on the graduate program itself. For instance, does it offer job rotation? So you get a broad, you get a broad perspective on the company as a whole, and then decide where you'd want to specialize within that company once you complete the graduate program. So I think that's some really good advice, and that's certainly what I did. I chose the industry. I had a short list of companies, and I proactively reached out to them to do that. I think that's some really good advice for you.
Do you have any advice on how graduates can actually figure out what sort of industry they want to go into or what company they're interested in?
Oh, geez, I think it's going to come down. It's going to come down to personal preference. What makes you tick as an individual. If you're really keen on sustainability, if you're keen on recycling, Visy might be the company for you. I think it may depend on your experience in university and the exposure you may have to industries that may think you to pause and think, well, maybe it's the oil and gas industry, or you would want to make a difference there, or you want to make a difference into a company that focuses on being green and that sort of thing. It's a tricky question. Sometimes you may just need to grab an opportunity that presents itself, and that could be in any industry. What I would say though is, yep, it's good to do your research and try and choose something, but also keep an open mind, because once you get on board, the world's your oyster, and if you play your cards right, it's the experience and the knowledge you'll gain, no matter what industry, will be transferable, absolutely, for sure. And just bear that in mind. It's the transferable skill that companies will often look at when hiring an individual.
You mentioned how to look at the graduate program and really think about what that offers, like rotations. Is there anything else that you think is important to look for in a graduate program? And maybe you can also talk a little bit about what Visy does in their graduate program.
Yeah, so I think graduate programs, first and foremost, need to be structured, right? So if companies address it in the right way, you'll be able to get details on the detail of what that program involves. So number one, it offers job rotation through the various departments or entities within that business. So for instance, here at Visy, we have pulp and paper, so we produce paper products. We've got Visy board, which produces cardboard packaging products, that you see. For instance, your slab of beer, for instance, that most likely will come out of a Visy factory. Your Amazon boxes that you receive your goodies from Amazon in are produced by Visy. But we also produce containers for the beverage industry, so cans, for instance, for bev can production, and we also produce glass. So we produce beer bottles and general food and beverage containers in glass for that industry. So, and every single one of those manufacturing processes involves a different process. It involves different machinery and so on. So working in Visy, you're going to get a very, very good introduction to a whole host of processes and technology that is certainly transferable across many industries. So first and foremost is getting a wide view of the company. It's got to be structured. So it's got to take what are the things it's going to teach you during the program. The way the program operates needs to be structured in a way that you're going to learn and grow, and you're going to gain those early skills that you need to drive your career forward. And I think third, and as equally important as the first two, is having that mentorship and leadership guidance to guide you in the right direction. Somebody to lean on to answer your questions, to get advice, and to help you develop as an individual. I think that's really key in any graduate program. And if you get those three, you're on an absolute winner.
Awesome. And we just have a question from the audience. So I'll pop that onto screen. So just here it says, mechatronics and IT at QUT, was wondering if once I graduate, if an employer expects me to know how to do most things their engineers do, or do they usually expect some extra training? I think that's...
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Hey, look, I think if a company is pragmatic, they don't expect a graduate engineer to know it all, right? So what's really important is you come out of uni with the foundation skills, with that foundation knowledge as an engineer to be able to work in any industry. And then the graduate program that you would be involved in would certainly then build on that foundation to build your skills in the specific industry you're in, and also more broader skills as an engineer. I think it would be, and I don't think I've come across any graduate program that expects, a graduate engineer to have deep skills and knowledge of the manufacturing processes day one. That's something the company needs to teach you, and something you need to build on throughout the progression of your career. And the one thing I will tell anyone, doesn't matter whether you're a first year graduate or you're a year away from retiring as an engineer, never stop learning. That's my very sound advice. Never ever stop learning, and always be coachable. I think is another very good attribute for any engineer.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. If you guys have any more questions, keep them coming, pop them in the comments. We want to hear from you and answer any questions you guys have. So continuing on, we'll talk a little bit about career progression now. So what kind of career progression can they expect in this industry?
So there is a career progression. What I would say from the start is, as a young engineer, you need to own your career progression. Not everything, you can't control everything, but you need to drive your career progression. And I'll touch on that in a bit more detail. So I think once you've chosen, and if you get an opportunity to work in an industry, or you've chosen an industry to work in, obviously you're going to have a 2-year, most are 2 years, some are more. But let's say you get into a 2-year graduate program. Obviously, following the structure of that graduate program is going to be key. But I think it's really about getting to the nitty-gritties, understanding, really being proactive, asking a lot of questions, and getting to know the processes and the technologies within that business very well, because that's going to give you a very broad base as an engineer going forward. And generally, you should be working. So if you're involved in engineering, particularly here in Australia with the legislation, you would need to be working under a certified engineer. And if that's not the case, then that's something you should raise with the company, that you would like to work under a certified engineer, because that's going to help you learn and grow quicker, I think. But I think also, it's your learning started with your degree, it doesn't end with your degree. And so, I would really encourage you, and as a strong suggestion, you need to think about what else you can do also to make you more attractive to hire once you've finished your graduate program. Now, any engineering certainly will involve projects. So, getting some project management training, or doing a project management course, and also doing change management. So something like a Six Sigma certification, a black belt or a green belt Six Sigma certification, is really going to add horsepower to your career early on. So you can even choose to do those before you even become a graduate engineer. You could do them during your university career, towards the end of your university career. But I certainly would suggest really doing project management and change, in particular Six Sigma, once you become a graduate engineer, because they will definitely give you, they'll supercharge your career as a young graduate engineer. I also think if you are looking to move into corporate leadership, depending on how quickly you want to do that, I probably got into leadership earlier than what I would hope for. But if you're looking to get into corporate leadership, perhaps doing an MBA at some point in your career, or even off the back of your university degree, again, is really going to help you drive your career in getting into corporate leadership.
You sort of mentioned talking a bit about things that they should do, like project management, whatnot. Is there anything that they could do in university that would make them stand out and look more attractive as a potential graduate to employ?
Yeah, look, I think there are some pragmatic things. I think you could do some of those things I've already mentioned while you were at university. But it's you could also try and get work experience working in an engineering company. And if, those opportunities aren't available to you, take engineering up as a hobby. So for instance, buy a 3D printer and play around and experiment with a 3D printer. And I think, that just shows your prospective employer that you're proactive, you're getting on the front foot, you're really interested and keen on engineering, and you want to learn and grow. And I think, that will help you stand out from the rest of the crowd. That's some really good advice to take on board.
That's awesome. I know many engineers who have they've got little side hustles with the 3D.
Yeah.
They've started Instagrams to show what they make. So I love seeing those. Those are awesome. Just bouncing back to something you said about leadership, if you want to get into, like a leadership
Mm-hmm.
position, is that something that typically requires an MBA, or is there ways to get into that without an MBA?
It's an interesting question. Um, I've seen throughout my career different things happen on the progression of people's careers. The one thing, look, it's not impossible to get into leadership um, without an MBA. Um, However, what I would suggest, and certainly the quickest career progressions and the most successful career progressions I've seen are graduate engineers who've got 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years under their belt within the company and then undertake an MBA. And what you find is the leadership of companies, and in particular quite a few that I've worked for in my career, really take those types of individuals under their wing quickly and develop them into leadership. But that, again, you're in control of that. That's something you've got to drive. Many engineers just want to be engineers, and that's absolutely perfectly fine. Not everybody will become a leader. But if you're interested in really getting to the top of the tree quickly, I would suggest an MBA off the back of your engineering degree to help drive that. And you've got to decide when that's right for you. I hope that helps.
No, that's awesome. So the next question I wanted to talk about is, what are the pros and cons of manufacturing engineering? If you can name any cons at all, feel free to do so. But yeah, I'd love to hear your take on that.
Look, I'm going to be honest about the cons, and I will share my own experience. But let's talk about the pros first, because I think the pros completely outweigh the cons. But I think we do have to be pragmatic and share those as well. So I think, so for me, it was about solving challenges and then seeing things you've done, that you've worked on, that you've created in operation, seeing the value that they deliver. I think that's such an amazing thing to happen, right? So it's building stuff, it's improving stuff. And as an engineer, if that doesn't make you tick, then you shouldn't be an engineer. So for me, that was really key. I think the second pro, which could be a con, but I think it's more of a pro, engineering, being a manufacturing engineer, you're not going to be sitting behind a desk 9 to 5. It's not a mundane desk job. You're going to be getting out there, right? Jumping into your PPE. You're going to be getting out into the plant. You're going to be talking to other plant engineers. You're going to be talking to the business. You're going to be talking to the people who run that machinery. And if you're ever fortunate enough to be involved in a greenfield, a new manufacturing facility, what an absolute privilege that is. But it's really getting out there, and it mixes things up, and I think it offers a lot of opportunity for engagement, developing your network, which I think is really important as a graduate engineer and as an engineer, because that will afford you opportunity in the future. But it's really getting out there and not being stuck behind a desk in an office job. I think that for me is a really big pro. I worked offshore, so I was having to do things like marine firefighting and helicopter crash survival and all sorts of things like that, which just made my career really a lot of fun and interesting. And so that's what I find a big pro of having been in engineering most of my career. I think also what you're finding right now, I think quite a few of the graduate programs are suffering as a result, is there's a skill shortage, not just here in Australia, but globally. And, a lot of businesses are now kicking their graduate programs into gear and really getting them moving, which means, you guys are more sought after. I think salaries are getting better. So, an engineer, your salaries are definitely going to increase, and you will stand to earn a good living from being an engineer. And I think, some of the things we've touched on before, I think it's really going to help, if you help build your network, develop your skills, it's really going to help you to progress your career, and perhaps even if you want to get into leadership, that certainly substantially increases your earning power as an engineer. And I think, job stability, job satisfaction as an engineer are all, probably top of the list at the moment. I think those are some of the really key pros. I think to touch on some of the cons, in fairness, you probably know that most manufacturing facilities, certainly oil and gas, whether it's food and beverage, whether it's pulp and paper or BevCan or glass here at Visy, these facilities run 24/7 by 365. And so there is a lot of time, energy, and effort you need to put into your roles. As I said, it's not a 9 to 5 job. You may find that your days can be pretty long. Sometimes you're going to need to work in the evenings because you can't disrupt key daytime operations. And so there's going to be a fair bit of stress. And I think if you don't work on the work-life balance elements, so taking a break when you get the opportunity to take a break and that sort of thing, it's going to be stressful. So yes, it's rewarding 100%, but it can be a very time-pressured and stressful industry, and particularly that most engineering initiatives are project-driven. So you've got a defined budget, you've got defined objectives, and you've got a defined timeline, and you have to deliver. You have to hit those milestones, and that does add pressure to the role for sure.
Fantastic. Thanks for those really honest pros and cons. They're really interesting to hear. And we have some questions in the audience, so we'll jump over to those now. So I'll pop you back on the screen. This is the first one we have. I have been modeling for my 3D printer in Fusion 360, but I've seen a lot of companies want SolidWorks, Autodesk, or Inventor experience. Would you recommend a certain CAD software?
Oh, geez. This is $1 million question. So I'll relate this to what we're doing here at Visy at the moment. So traditionally, we have used Autodesk products, including Autodesk Inventor. And they have been used for decades, guys, honestly. Very heavy in use. I would absolutely say that getting familiar with the Autodesk Inventor is a really good thing. And bear in mind, today the idea of designing in 2D, it's kind of a little bit old school. I'm not saying that it's dead. We certainly still do 2D designs, fast and furious designs here in Visy, but the world has gone to 3D. So definitely focusing on 3D design, but also, you've got, particularly in the manufacturing industry, Aviva E3D is also widely used. So getting to grips with that. If you just want to, particularly around, and I think the question relates more to 3D printing, Autodesk Inventor is definitely one that should be on your list to get familiar with for sure. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. And now I'll jump over to the next question. So we just have, hey, Neil, what have you found? We've kind of touched on it, but if there's anything else you want to add, what have you found working at Visy in particular that makes it stand out, and the cons from the other industries that you have worked in?
I'm going to have to be honest here. Look, Visy is a great company. I've been with Visy for just over 3 months now. And look, why I chose to join Visy is I care about the environment. I know it certainly ticked all the boxes for me when it came to, doing the right thing for the planet, being a sustainable business, and making a difference. And I think in today's world, you've got to join a business that is dear to your heart that you want to work for. Visy certainly does that, right? We really drive sustainability. We try and reduce as much landfill waste when it comes to cardboard and paper as possible. In fact, even as we speak today here in where I'm based in Cooloo in Melbourne, we're putting in brand new technology, spending tens of millions of dollars, in fact, even billions of dollars in the future to be able to add more waste to our process, which, as I mentioned earlier, that's reducing landfill waste. So I think, Visy ticks the boxes. And if you're passionate about that sort of thing, working for a company from Visy, like Visy, is really going to help you be happy in what you do as an engineer. I think if you work in an industry and you really don't like that they pollute the environment and so on and so forth, we won't get too sensitive on that, but then you shouldn't be working for them. I think some of the cons of being an engineer I touched on earlier. It's the work-life balance aspect, the time pressures. There've been periods in my career where I've worked 100-hour weeks, and in one of those periods it was for 16 straight months. So it can be massively rewarding, don't get me wrong, but certainly when you get embroiled in a project, a substantial project, it's going to swallow your time. And again, as an engineer, you have to actively manage your time and try and develop work-life balance, but still meet the objectives of the project. So yes, from a personal perspective, I've been sucked up, chewed up, and spat out the other end. 100-hour weeks is not pretty, but it was immensely enjoyable. But yeah, I was at the end of that 16 months, I was very relieved and happy to be at the end of it, but also massively proud to have been part of something that produced something that will help society now into many, many years in the future.
Awesome. So now we'll talk a little bit about how graduates who are applying to Visy can stand out. Any tips you have for them? So is there any advice you have on how they can stand out in the interview or just anywhere in the application process?
Absolutely. So I think we've already talked a little bit about the application process. I think there are a couple of key points here, and I see this all the time. It's just the common mistakes that I think graduates make. So number one, just because you're a graduate and you've just finished your degree or you're about to finish your degree, I've seen some terrible CVs come through, right? Spelling mistakes, using very old type structures, poor grammar. Guys, the number one tip is have your CV professionally written, right? So, and that's probably not going to cost you more than a couple of $100 at most, right? So have your CV professionally written. I would absolutely say try and work at a coffee shop. Try and get some work experience that you can add to your CV. 100%. So, whether it's a part-time job, doesn't matter what it is, try and get some work experience that you can use, that you can also provide, that can provide a reference for you going forward. I've interviewed many graduates and got references from the coffee shop they've worked at, and that's been glowing, and that does wonders to get you into a role. Make no mistake on that. But also, we touched on hobbies like 3D printing, I think is a really good one. But one of the other key things is, and is more often than not disregarded, unfortunately, is really write a good cover letter. If you want to get into the interview, sometimes what can stand you out from the crowd apart from your CV is just a really good cover letter, and it's got to come from your heart. So, what you can bring to the company, and what you can do for the company. So it's not focusing on what you've done, but it's focusing on what you can do. So if you bear that in mind, that's really, really, really key. The second aspect of this is actually in the interview. Do as much research as you can on the company you're interviewing for. So many times I've asked just one or two basic questions, and it's very clear that the candidate has done absolutely no research. So spend the time, do your research on the company. Look at up-to-date news. What is the company doing? Have they had leadership changes? Get to know what the CEO is doing. Follow them on LinkedIn if you can. But really try and do as much research so that when you come into that interview, an icebreaker, which really goes down well, is just talk about one of maybe the latest initiatives the company is doing, or a recent publication on the share market, or something that you can refer to break the ice. I think that's really, really fundamental. And then just show interest, show energy during the interview. And what's really important is when you get asked a question, think about the question, think about the answer, and then give the answer. Be concise, give it, don't ramble on, and then wait for the next question.
Awesome. And what can interviewees expect in technical interviews?
So technical interviews will come in all shapes and guises, but essentially what they're trying to work out, can you solve problems? So, yep, you have a wonderful engineering degree, but do you have an analytical mind? Can you think about a problem, and can you solve that challenge? They're also going to want, and believe it or not, they're also going to want to know that you can break down a technical complex problem so that anyone can understand it. So they're going to be looking at your communication skills, and they're going to be looking at how you interpret a problem and then communicate that back to a layman who knows nothing about it but would have an idea and an understanding once you had explained it to them. And that's important because many business people are not technical savvy, and if you're trying to solve technical problems with the business, you need to be able to talk to the business in business speak. So those are some of the key things they are going to be checking, and that will come in various guises. They may give you an assignment to prepare beforehand. There will certainly be some form of psychometric testing, and various internal tests that are going to test all of that, along with just standard questioning during the interview. But that's what they're going to focus on, and certainly that's what we do when we interview graduates here at Visy and other companies that I've worked for in the past. I think probably one of the most important aspects is they're going to want to know you're a team player. They don't want to hire a lone wolf, right? Manufacturing engineers requires very, very strong teamwork, so that you need to be you need the ability to be able to work in a team and solve complex technical challenges. That's what they're going to be testing.
Awesome. And just before we go into the opportunities that Visy has, just have one question in regards to LinkedIn. So would you recommend the applicants have a up-to-date and well-maintained LinkedIn?
Okay, so I'm going to extend it beyond just LinkedIn. And as a graduate engineer, in fact, even as somebody studying at university or college, I think it's really fundamental to start developing your LinkedIn profile from day one. So the day you leave school and the day you go to university, get into LinkedIn. And that's important because every single company, when they're looking at you as an individual, to see what makes you tick, who you are, what you've done, the first port of call is going to be LinkedIn. And if you have a weak LinkedIn profile, they're going to move on to someone else. And also bear in mind that recruiters will do research on LinkedIn. As a recruiter, they will be using software platforms to identify candidates, and that's an algorithm that a piece of software is using. It will then automatically filter candidates and present a shortlist to the recruiter. So it's there to be able to make a recruiter's life easier, simpler, and faster. So if you don't have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, you're not even going to get through the shortlisting process in recruiters. So LinkedIn is really key. But what I would also strongly suggest is be very conscious of your online profile in general. So I've known many recruiters as well as companies who are checking individuals when, before they offer a role, will often look at the wider online profile of an individual. So, only post things on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and so on that you would happy your mum see. Because if your mum's not happy seeing them, nor would be your prospective employer. So just consider your wider online role as well. I'm not saying it needs to be squeaky clean, but if your mum disapproves, then your employer is going to disapprove as well. So just bear that in mind as well. I hope that helps.
Awesome. So let's chat a little bit about the job opportunities that Visy has right now.
Sure.
And one other question we also had was, is there an undergraduate program? So I thought we could touch on those at the same time.
So let me answer the second question first. So Visy has, an industry-leading graduate program. We have a very structured 2-year graduate program that would cycle you through numerous of our businesses as you travel through that graduate program. So we have opportunities in our pulp and paper business, and that's manufacturing paper. We also have the recycling industry, so glass, paper, aluminium, and so on. Our packaging industry, so making boxes, as I mentioned earlier. But we also have opportunities in logistics. We offer logistics services to the manufacturing industries throughout Australia, and we even have our own automation team. So a lot of opportunity to get some very broad industry experience within Visy. From an overall graduates program, as I mentioned earlier, it's a 2-year structured program. You also are given that mentorship and leadership training, which I mentioned is pretty fundamental earlier on. So it's a great program. It's very structured, and we're here to help you progress through your career. So at the end of the 2 years, you can get a permanent role either here at Visy if you've shown your value, or you can go out into the industry and get a role. So looking at where we have roles is we have quite a few roles here in Victoria, and I can go into a little bit more detail a little bit later on. But we also have roles up in Queensland. We have roles up in New South Wales and New Zealand. So we are actively recruiting graduates, and you can go online and have a look. We are actively recruiting graduates for our 2023 intake program. So I can touch on some of those roles just as a few examples. So we're typically looking in electrical and mechanical engineering, as well as chemical engineering. We've got mechatronics. We've got electrical, mechanical. As I mentioned earlier, we also do logistics and supply chain, so we offer graduates in that area as well. But also civil and mechanical engineering. So locations, here in Victoria, we've got Campbellfield, Coolaroo, Clayton, Essendon, Springvale. Goodness, there's quite a few. Coburg as well. We've got up in Queensland, we've got opportunities for a new greenfield site up in Yatala. We've also got a current plant up in Brisbane. We've got opportunities in Hemmant, Carroll Park. Gibson Island is another large facility of ours. We also have a huge paper mill, in fact 2 mills up in Tumut in New South Wales. So if you really enjoy the country life and waking up to rolling hills and mist in the mornings, that could be what you're looking for. And then New Zealand, we have mechanical engineering and electrical in Auckland, as well as in Wiri, and I think it's pronounced Onehunga. So yeah, we've got many opportunities spread broadly across Australia. So there's certainly no shortage, and really encourage you to apply. Absolutely apply.
Awesome. So we'll wrap up today's session. So to wrap up the session, let me ask my final question, which is, what advice do you have for graduate or student engineers in general, whether they are wanting to start a career in manufacturing or, just for engineers in general. Do you have any final last words of advice that you'd like to share?
I think I think I'll share what I believe helped my career. One is to be passionate, to be energetic, to be personable, but also, select the industry you want to work in, and even go down to selecting the company you want to work for. Right? I think that's certainly what I did in fact, not just in my early career, but I've done that throughout my career. So I think if you follow that advice, look, sometimes it's just not possible. I haven't been successful getting into a company, all the companies that I've wanted to work for. But I think if you do your research, you get a short list, and you proactively go after what you want, sometimes you're going to really surprise yourself and see what you can achieve. Get out there, make yourself known. And once you get into a role, really focus on building your professional network, speak to people. Also, be happy to share, so that as you progress through your career, you also want to make a difference, I'm sure. Also help young graduate engineers coming through the program. So it's very much a bit of give and take. But yeah, just get out there, get on the front foot, get your shortlist going, and be proactive. But be energetic, and never forget to put on a smile. Number one advice in any interview or any engagement: be friendly, be personable, and don't forget to smile. Enjoy what you do.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Neil. So we'll wrap up today's session. It was very valuable. We covered so many different topics, and that was really awesome. So thanks so much, Neil, for jumping on and, being a speaker for this webinar. I'm sure it was really valuable. And yeah, it was really interesting to hear about, what you do in Visy as well. So for anyone who has not yet signed up to Grad Australia, make sure you set up your profile so that you can get notified of upcoming sessions, as well as, job opportunities, and our newsletter as well, where we send out, career tips, career advice. We have a bunch of it. So, and make sure you also share these career talk webinars with your friends as well, or anyone you know who's a graduate or student, because we do them on a weekly basis and we cover all sorts of topics. So so for Thursday, for example, we have one on tech. So if you know anyone who wants to navigate a career in tech, then definitely send them our way. And yeah, that was it for today's session. If you guys have any questions or you want to reach out to us at all, feel free to do so. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can even contact Grad Australia, shoot us an email or comment on any of our social posts, and we'll make sure to get back to you. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for tuning in today. And that was the end of today's session. I hope we can see you next time. Make sure you go and check out Visy on Grad Australia and apply to their graduate programs. So yeah, that's it for today. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye, and good luck.